classic definition is straightforward. A sunk cost is any investment, time, money, energy, emotion that has already been made and cannot be recovered regardless of what you decide next. The fallacy is the tendency to let those irrecoverable costs influence future decisions, even though logically they shouldn't. What you've already spent doesn't change what your options are going forward. The rational choice should always be based on future value, not past investment. That explanation is correct, but it's incomplete because it treats the sunk cost fallacy as a reasoning error, something that happens in your logic, when in most cases, especially in personal situations, it's actually happening somewhere much deeper than logic. Here's the layer most explanations miss. When investment is long enough and personal enough, it stops being just about time or money. It becomes about identity, and leaving stops being a practical decision about the future. It becomes a verdict about the past, and specifically a verdict about the person who made those investments. This is the mechanism at the core of why people stay in situations they know aren't working long past the point where any neutral outside observer could see they should leave. It's not primarily about not wanting to lose the investment. It's about not wanting to become the person who wasted it. Think about what leaving a 5-year relationship says internally if you've built your sense of self around that relationship. It doesn't just say this didn't work out. It quietly says, I spent 5 years wrong. My judgment was poor. The story I told about this, and about myself within it, was a story about a mistake. The loss isn't just the relationship. It's the version of yourself that the relationship confirmed. The same mechanism operates in careers, in long-term projects, in belief systems you've built a public identity around. The longer you've invested, and the more. You know it's not working. You've known for a while. The relationship, the job, the project, the friendship, something in you has already registered that this isn't going where you need it to go. And yet you stay. Not because you're happy, not because things are improving, but because of something that has nothing to do with the present situation and everything to do with the past one. How much you've already put in. 5 years, 3 years of effort, money spent, chances passed up, other paths not taken. The weight of all of it sits somewhere behind your chest every time you consider walking away, and it feels impossible to leave without that investment meaning something. This isn't irrationality. It isn't weakness. It's one of the most consistent and well-documented mechanisms in human psychology, and once you understand how it actually works, not just as a financial error, but as something much more personal, you'll never look at your inability to let go the same way again. By the end of this video, you'll understand the real reason past investment makes future decisions so difficult, why this has almost nothing to do with logic, and the specific question that separates genuine perseverance from a psychological trap you're no longer choosing, but simply stuck inside. Stay until the end, because the last part explains why the longer you stay, the harder leaving actually becomes, even when nothing is getting better. Let's start with what the sunk cost fallacy actually is, because most explanations of it stop too early. The classic definition is straightforward. A sunk cost is any investment, time, money, energy, emotion that has already been made and cannot be recovered regardless of what you decide next. The fallacy is the tendency to let those irrecoverable costs influence future decisions, even though logically they shouldn't. Let's start with what the sunk cost fallacy actually is, because most explanations of it stop too early. The publicly you've committed, the more leaving threatens not just the investment, but the coherence of the self-narrative that investment supported. And self-narrative threat activates something much older and more powerful than rational cost-benefit analysis. There's a second layer that compounds this, and it's what creates the spiral that makes long-term stuck situations so hard to exit. Escalation of commitment. The longer you stay in a situation that isn't working, the more you invest to try to make it work. Because each new investment is an attempt to justify the previous ones, to turn the sunk cost into something that ultimately paid off. Each additional year, each additional effort, each additional sacrifice doesn't just add to the sunk cost. It increases the psychological cost of leaving, because now there's even more past investment that leaving would render wasted. This is why people often describe feeling more trapped the longer a bad situation continues, not less. Every attempt to fix things and fail becomes a new layer of investment that makes the original decision to stay feel even more necessary to vindicate. The trap doesn't just hold you. It tightens over time, automatically, through the very efforts you make to escape it by improving the situation rather than leaving it. So why doesn't simply knowing this help? Because the mechanism isn't operating in the part of your mind where knowledge lives. It's operating in the part where identity lives, where the story of who you are is maintained and protected. Knowing intellectually that sunk costs shouldn't influence decisions doesn't change the fact that leaving still feels, at a level below rational thought, like an act of self-betrayal, an admission that the past version of you made mistakes significant enough to walk away from. This is also why well-meaning advice to just cut your losses is rarely effective. It addresses the logical layer while completely ignoring the identity layer, where the real resistance is actually located. Cutting losses isn't primarily frightening because of what it costs you going forward. It's frightening because of what it says about who you are going backward. So what actually helps? First, separate the decision about the future from the verdict about the past. These are two different questions, and conflating them is what makes leaving feel impossible. The question you need to answer is not, was this a mistake? The question is, given where things actually are right now, what serves me best going forward? Your past investment is the same regardless of what you decide next. It doesn't change. What changes is what your future looks like depending on your next move. Second, reframe what staying actually costs. Sunk cost thinking focuses attention entirely on what was already spent. But staying has a cost too. The ongoing investment of time, energy, and alternative possibilities you're continuing to forego every day you remain. Making that future cost visible, specific, and concrete is what creates a genuine comparison rather than a lopsided one that only accounts for the past. Third, distinguish between perseverance and entrapment. These two things can look identical from the outside, and they feel similar from the inside, but they have a different internal signal. Perseverance is driven by genuine belief in a specific future outcome based on actual current evidence. Entrapment is driven by the need to not have been wrong. Asking honestly, am I still here because I believe in where this is going, or because I can't afford to admit it's not going there, is uncomfortable, but it's the question that actually separates the two. Fourth, allow the sunk cost to mean something without requiring it to dictate your future. Years invested in something that didn't ultimately work are not wasted if they taught you something real, shaped you in ways that matter, or gave you experience that transfers forward. The investment can have value even if the situation it was placed in ultimately didn't work out. Separating the value of the experience from the verdict on the choice is what allows you to leave without needing to retroactively erase the years you spent. Here's what ties this together. You didn't stay because you were irrational. You stayed because leaving threatened something deeper than a financial loss. It threatened the coherence of a story you'd been telling about yourself, built from years of investment you weren't willing to declare meaningless. That's not a logical error. That's a deeply human response to one of the most uncomfortable truths about how identity works. That sometimes the most honest thing you can do for your future is to stop defending your past. If this explains something you've been stuck in, tell us in the comments what you've stayed in longer than you logically should have, and what finally helped you see it clearly. And if you want to keep uncovering the hidden mechanics behind your own decisions, the next video is right there, waiting for you.